Sunday, as Crop and I were lugging a latrine bucket on a pole across the barrack yard, Himmeltoss came by, all polished up and spry for going out. He planted himself in front of us and asked how we liked the job. In spite of ourselves, we tripped and emptied the bucket over his legs. He raved, but the limit had been reached. That means clink, he yelled, but Crop had had enough. There'll be an inquiry first, he said, and then we'll unload. Mind how you speak to a non-commissioned officer, bawled Himmeltoss. Have you lost your sense? You wait till you're spoken to. What will you do, anyway? Show you up, Corporal, said Crop, his thumbs in line with the seams of his trousers. Himmeltoss saw that we meant it and went off without saying a word. But before he disappeared, he growled, You'll drink this. But that was the end of his authority. He tried it once more in the plow field with his prepare to advance, advance, and lie down. We obeyed each order, since an order's an order and has to be obeyed. But we did it so slowly that Himmeltoss became desperate. Carefully, we went down on our knees, then on our hands, and so on. In the meantime, quite infuriated, he had given another a command. But before we had even begun to sweat, he was hoarse. After that, he left us in peace. He did indeed always refer to us as swine, but there was, nevertheless, a certain respect in his tone. There were many other staff corporals, the majority of whom were more decent, but above all, each of them wanted to keep his good job there as long as possible, and this he could do only by being strict with the recruits. So we were put through every conceivable refinement of parade ground soldiering till we often howled with rage. Many of us became ill through it. Wolf actually died of inflammation of the lung. But we would have felt ridiculous had we hauled down our colors. We became hard, suspicious, pitiless, vicious, tough. And that was good. For these attributes were just what we lacked. Had we gone into the trenches without this period of training, most of us would certainly have gone mad. Only thus we were prepared for what awaited us. We did not break down, but adapted ourselves. Our 20 years, which made many another thing so grievous, helped us in this. But by far the most important result was that it awakened in us a strong, practical sense of esprit de corps, which in the field developed into the finest thing that arose out of the war comradeship. I sit by Kenrick's bed. He's sinking steadily. Around us is a great commotion. A hospital train has arrived, and the wounded fit to be moved are being selected. The doctor passes by Kenrick's bed without once looking at him. Next time, Franz, I say. He raises himself on the pillow with his elbows. They have amputated my leg. He knows it, too, then. I nodded in answer. You must be thankful you've come off with that. He's silent. I resume. It might have been both legs, Franz. Wickler's lost his right arm. That's much worse. Besides, you'll be going home. He looks at me. Do you think so? Of course. Do you think so? He repeats. Sure, Franz. Once you've got over the operation. He beckons me to bend down. I stoop over him and he whispers, I don't think so. Don't talk rubbish, Franz. In a couple of days, you'll see for yourself. What is it anyway? An amputated leg? Here, they patch up far worse than things than that. He lifts one hand. Look here, though. These fingers. That's the result of the operation. Just eat decently, and you'll soon be well again. Do they look after you properly? He points to a dish that is still half full. I get excited. Franz, you must eat. Eating is the main thing. That looks good, too. He turns away. After a pause, he says slowly, I wanted to become a head forester once. So you may still, I assure him. There are splendid artificial limbs now. You'll hardly know there was anything missing. They're fixed onto the muscles. You can move the fingers and work and even write with an artificial hand. And besides, they'll be able to make new improvements. For a while, he lies still. Then he says, "You can take my lace up boots with you for Mueller." I nod and wonder what to say to encourage him. His lips have fallen away, his mouth has become larger, his teeth stick out and look as though they were made of chalk. The flesh melts, the forehead bulges more prominently, the cheekbones protrude, the skeleton is working itself through. The eyes are already sunken in. In a couple of hours, it'll be over. He's not the first that I have seen thus, but we grew up together, and that always makes it a bit different. I've copied his essays. At school, he used to wear a brown coat with a belt and shiny sleeves. He was the only one of us, too, who could do the giant's turn on the horizontal bar. His hair flew in his face like silk when he did. Cantrek was proud of him, but he couldn't stand cigarettes. His skin was very white. He had something of the girl about him. I glance at my boots. They're big and clumsy. The breeches are tucked into them, and standing up on one looks well built and powerful in these great drain pipes. But when we go bathing and strip, suddenly we have slender legs again and slight shoulders. We're no longer soldiers, but little more than boys. No one would believe that we could carry packs. It is a strange moment when we stand naked. Then we become civilians and almost feel ourselves to be so. When bathing, Franz Kemmerich looked as slight and frail as a child. There he lies now. But why? The whole world ought to pass by this bed and say, "That is Franz Kemmerich, 19 and a half years old. He doesn't want to die. Let him not die." My thoughts become confused. This atmosphere, carbolic and gangrene, clogs the lungs. It's a thick gruel. It suffocates. It grows dark. Kemmerich's face changes color. It lifts from the pillow and is so pale that it gleams. The mouth moves slightly. I draw near to him. He whispers, "If you find my watch, send it home." I do not reply. It is no use any more. No one can console him. I am wretched with helplessness. This forehead with its hollow temples, this mouth that now seems all teeth, this sharp nose, and the fat, weeping woman at home to whom I must write. If only the letter were sent off already. Hospital orderlies go to and fro with bottles and pails. One of them comes up, casts a glance at Kemmerich, and goes away again. You can see he's waiting. Apparently, he wants the bed. I bend over Franz and talk to him as though that could save him. "Perhaps you'll go to the convalescent home at Klosterberg, among the villas, Franz. Then you can look out the window across the fields to the two trees on the horizon. It's the loveliest time of the year now, when the corn ripens. At evening, the fields and the sunlight look like mother of pearl. And the lane of poplars by the Klosterbach, where we used to catch sticklebacks. You can build an aquarium again and keep fish in it. You can go without asking anyone. You can even play the piano if you want to." I lean down over his face, which lies in the shadow. He still breathes, lightly. His face is wet. He's crying. What a fine mess I have made of it with my foolish talk. "But Franz," I put my arm round his shoulder and put my face against his, "will you sleep now?" He does not answer. The tears run down his cheeks. I would like to wipe them away, but my handkerchief is too dirty. An hour passes. I sit tensely and watch his every moment in case he may perhaps say something. What if he were to open his mouth and cry out? But he only weeps, his head turned aside. He does not speak of his mother or his brothers and sisters. He says nothing. All that lies behind him. He is entirely alone now with his little life of 19 years and cries because it leaves him. This is the most disturbing and hardest parting that I have ever seen, although it was pretty bad too with Jin, who called for his mother, a big bear of a fellow who, with wild eyes full of terror, held off the doctor from his bed with the dagger until he collapsed. Suddenly, Kemrick groans and begins to gurgle. I jump up, stumble outside, and demand, "Where's the doctor? Where's the doctor?" As I catch sight of the white apron, I seize hold of it. "Come, quick! Franz Kemrick is dying!" He frees himself and asks an orderly standing by, "Which will that be?" He says, "Bed 26, amputated thigh." He sniffs. "How should I know anything about it? I've amputated 5 legs today." He shoves me away, says to the hospital orderly, "You see to it," and hurries off to the operating room. I tremble with rage as I go along with the orderly. The man looks at me and says, "One operation after another since 5 o'clock this morning. You know, today alone there have been 16 deaths. Yours is the 17th. There will probably be 20 altogether." I become faint. All at once, I cannot do any more. I won't revile any more. It's senseless. I could drop down and never rise up again. We're by Kemrick's bed. He's dead. The face is still wet from the tears. The eyes are half open and yellow like old horn buttons. The orderly pokes me in the ribs. "Are you taking his things with you?" I nod. He goes on, "We must take him away at once. We want the bed. Outside they're lying on the floor." I collect Kemrick's things and untie his identification disc. The orderly asks about the pay book. I say that it is probably in the orderly room and go. Behind me, they are already hauling Franz onto the waterproof sheet. Outside the door, I'm aware of the darkness and the wind as a deliverance. I breathe as deep as I can, and I feel the breeze in my face, warm and soft as never before. Thoughts of girls, of flowery meadows, of white clouds suddenly come into my head. My feet begin to move forward in my boots. I go quicker. I run. Soldiers pass by me. I hear their voices without understanding. The earth is streaming with forces which pour into me through the soles of my feet. The night crackles electrically. The front thunders a concert of drums. My limbs move supplely. I feel my joints strong. I breathe the air deeply. The night lives. I live. I feel a hunger greater than comes from the belly alone. Mueller stands in front of the hut waiting for me. I give him the boots. We go in and he tries them on. They fit well. He roots among his supplies and offers me a fine piece of saveloy. With it goes hot tea and rum. Chapter 13, page 35. Reinforcements have arrived. The vacancies have been filled and the sacks of straw in the huts are already booked. Some of them are old hands, but there are 25 men of a later draft from the base. They're about 2 years younger than us. Kropp nudges me. "Seen the infants?" I nod. We stick out our chest, shave in the open, shove our hands in our pockets, inspect the recruits, and feel ourselves Stone Age veterans. Kaczynski joins us. We stroll past the horse boxes and go over to the reinforcements, who are already being issued with gas masks and coffee. "Long time since you've had anything decent to eat, eh?" Cat asks one of the youngsters. He grimaces. "For breakfast, turnip bread. Lunch, turnip stew. Supper, turnip cutlets and turnip salad." Cat gives a knowing whistle. "Bread made of turnips? You've been in luck. It's nothing new for it to be made of sawdust. But what do you say to haricot beans? Have some?" The youngster turns red. "You can't kid me." Kaczynski merely says, "Fetch your mess tin." We follow curiously. He takes us to a tub beside his straw sack. Sure enough, it is half full of beef and beans. Kaczynski plants himself in front of it like a general and says, "Sharp eyes and light fingers. That's what the Prussians say." We're surprised. "Great guts, Cat. How did you come by that?" I ask him. Ginger was glad I took it. I gave him 3 pieces of parachute silk for it. Cold beans taste fine, too. Patronizingly, he gives the youngster a portion and says, "Next time you come with your mess tin, have a cigar or a chew of tobacco in your other hand. Get me?" Then he turns to us. "You get off scot-free, of course." We couldn't do without Kaczynski. He has a sixth sense. There are such people everywhere, but one does not appreciate it at first. Every company has one or two. Kaczynski is the smartest I know. By trade, he's a cobbler, I believe, but that hasn't anything to do with it. He understands all trades. It's a good thing to be friends with him, as Crop and I are, and Hay West is too, more or less. But Hay is rather the executive arm, operating under Cat's orders when things come to blows. For that, he has his qualifications. For example, we land at night in some entirely unknown spot, a sorry hole, that has been eaten out to the very walls. We're quartered in a small, dark factory adapted to the purpose. There are beds in it, or rather bunks, a couple of wooden beams over which wire netting is stretched. Wire netting is hard, and there's nothing to put on it. Our waterproof sheets are too thin. We use our blankets to cover ourselves. Cat looks at the place and then says to Hay Westus, "Come with me." They go off to explore. Half an hour later, they're back again with arms full of straw. Cat has found a horse box with straw in it. Now we might sleep if we weren't so terribly hungry. Crop asks an artilleryman who has been some time in this neighborhood, "Is there a canteen anywhereabouts?" "Is there a what?" He laughs. "There's nothing to be had here. You won't find so much as a crust of bread here." "Aren't there any inhabitants here at all, then?" He spits. "Yes, a few, but they hang around the cookhouse and beg. That's a bad business. Then we'll have to pull in our belts and wait till the rations come up in the morning." But I see Cat has put on his cap. "Where to, Cat?" I ask. "Just to explore the place a bit." He strolls off. The artilleryman grins scornfully. "Go ahead and explore, but don't strain yourself in carrying what you find." Disappointed, we lie down and consider whether we couldn't have a go at the iron rations. But it's too risky, so we have to try to get a wink of sleep. Crop divides a cigarette and hands me half. Jaden gives an account of his national dish, broad beans and bacon. He despises it when not flavored with bog myrtle. And, for God's sake, let it all be cooked together, not the potatoes, the beans, and the bacon separately. Someone growls that he will pound Jaden into the bog myrtle if he doesn't shut up. Then all becomes quiet in the big room. Only the candles flickering from the necks of a couple of bottles and the artilleryman spitting every now and then. We're just dozing off, and when the door opens and Cat appears, I think I must be dreaming. He has 2 loaves of bread under his arm and a blood-stained sandbag full of horseflesh in his hand. The artilleryman's pipe drops from his mouth. He feels the bread. "Real bread? By God! And still hot, too?" Cat gives no explanation. He has the bread, and the rest doesn't matter. I'm sure that if he were planted down in the middle of the desert, in half an hour he would have gathered together a supper of roast meat, dates, and wine. "Got some wood," he says curtly to Hay. Then he hauls out a frying pan from under his coat and a handful of salt as well as a lump of fat from his pocket. He has thought of everything. Hay makes a fire on the floor. It lights up the empty room of the factory. We climb out of bed. The artilleryman hesitates. He wonders whether to praise Cat and so perhaps gain a little for himself. But Kaczynski doesn't even see him. He might as well be thin air. He goes off cursing. Cat knows the way to roast horse flesh so that Practice Brooklyn Dolly. Oh, missed a page.